Students Who Design is a podcast and video series that bridges students and the design industry. By students, for students. Be sure to check out our website, studentswho.design.
This is Students Who Design.
Today we'll be talking to Andrew Aquino. He studied computer science at Cornell University, but now works as a product designer at Facebook.
In this episode, we'll cover teaching a design class, building a design community at your school, and so much more. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Students Who Design is sponsored in part by Facebook Design. For more resources and information about designing at Facebook, visit facebook.design and check out open roles at facebook.com/careers.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the show. First off, we'd like to introduce what school you graduated from, your major, and where you're working next.
Awesome, and thanks for having me, by the way. So I graduated as a computer science major from Cornell University, and up next I'll be working at Facebook as a product designer.
Cool. Can you describe your path through product design?
Yeah, so a bit unorthodox, but I started out really liking graphic design and art. Did 99 designs for a bit. Throughout high school, I wanted to be an architect, but ultimately, due to cultural pressures, I was kind of pushed to engineering. When I got into Cornell University, I didn't really know what I wanted to pursue. I wanted to do civil engineering because it was tangential to architecture, but I didn't really know what it was all about. Ultimately decided that anything related to physics, chemistry,
so anything engineering.
Yeah, so anything of the hard sciences I just could not do. So it kind of pushed me to computer science, or just more within the internet space, and something that I kind of enjoy doing. If HTML and CSS is still fully under that umbrella.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I started doing CS work. Ultimately realized I wasn't that great at coding in general.
So you're not good at your major and you don't like engineering.
Right, yeah. So I wasn't really good at a lot of those things. And during my sophomore year, where everyone's on the internship season hunt, I had a lot of trouble finding my first job. But luckily, a semester before, early sophomore year, I was still doing graphic design on the side just for extra money. And I had one UI job for a friend who was doing a startup. And I think that role helped me build up one piece that was kind of within digital products. And also he was my first connection to they had a speaker at one of their club events, and he gave me a contact for BuzzFeed. You
said BuzzFeed?
Yeah, BuzzFeed.
Okay.
And it was for the VP of design at the time, and I just emailed them saying that I was interested in this role, didn't really know what it was, and eventually got my first internship.
Cool.
So,
do you think you being in an engineering college and studying a technical degree helped or detracted you in the field? Because I'm sure there's students who maybe in similar situations but want to get into the creative industry.
Yeah, so I think it did both. One, it helped me in that I felt like I was a diverse candidate. I wasn't from an art school. Had a completely different major, so it was a whole different skill set. And that's good, but that's only beneficial to some degree. I think the real value came from being relevant. For building digital products, you're working with engineers and being able to talk about specific developer issues or programming problems with them. Instead of sitting out from the conversation was really beneficial. But I think the most important aspect of that was empathizing with those developers too, where it's not you just understand what work they're doing. It's more about really feeling the hardships of having to execute a specific design. It might seem like a button for you as a designer, but to them it could be fiddling with so many things on the back end.
Yeah, there's a really good example of I think it was some business tool for some company where they wanted to show what the remaining balance was, and it seems very simple, right? You just subtract two numbers.
Yeah,
but
right.
For engineering, it's no, because currencies change every day. So you would have to know the global currency.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's
Yeah,
an international product.
Yeah.
So I think knowing those constraints can definitely help, because then you don't go to engineering with these suggestions and not think about the implications.
Right, and then you ultimately have to realize you have to include them in the conversation of whether a design decision is something that is beneficial for both parties. So
I want to touch on your involvement at school. So you were the design lead for a couple of years for Cornell University Application Development, or
right.
CU App Dev for short. Could you tell us more about this organization and how did it help you grow?
Yeah, so the mission is twofold. On the basic level, we're a team that wants to build digital products from conception all the way to the App Store. specifically iOS products. And the other part to that where it's like, as a team, we needed people to help build it, obviously, build and design and manage, the workflow. And we realized that the school wasn't offering that pool of people to help us recruit to actually build these products. Like people didn't know how to do Swift programming or Objective-C, or people didn't know how to design a product or especially use Sketch for that matter. And we created these courses to kind of educate that pool that we would eventually recruit from for our project team.
Got it. And so you also taught a class within the organization called Introduction to Digital Product Design. What was the inspiration for that, and what did the initial curriculum look like, and how did it evolve into what it is today?
Yeah, I think the inspiration comes from, as a beginner designer, my first internship, you learn so much. You realize that there's something more to product design, especially within the tech space, that you just don't learn at school. And I think, me and Nicole, who I started the class with and also taught the class with, we realized there's just so much that we can talk about. And like one of those things was like the process, right? Like what is the design process? Like how do you get from conception to completion? What are the steps to get there? And like people follow a similar trajectory, and we basically abstracted that process into a 10-week course. Okay. We made research one lecture, we made visual design another lecture, and stuff like that.
So were you just teaching these topics independently, or was this like a project that the students were working on throughout the course?
Yeah, we actually originally tried to do one independent classes
lecture for everything.
Yeah, but we ultimately felt like people needed to get something out of the course in a way that would be beneficial for their growth. And as in growth, like it's their first internship. And most new designers don't get the job or get the internship because they don't have a case study. And that was kind of like the first problem that we were trying to tackle. Like how do we get these people to actually get a case study that is not just a visual design refresh of an existing product? And that's kind of
So what's the difference between like a redesign and a case study?
Yeah, so like
because we see both of them everywhere online.
Yeah, right? We see both of them, and sometimes you see a redesigned case study, but then it's
or
more
a case study redesign.
Yeah. So it could be either or, but they both can exist in like the same project. But like what we see as a case study is basically a write-up of a conception to completion that shows a thoughtful decision-making process through each step of the way. And that could also mean showing all the bad solutions that you could have thought about that weren't validated to be in the final product. And that's kind of what we wanted to teach in the class. And the difference between that and like some redesigns is that, and it's okay to do that. I think it's a great exercise visually. Some people will say that a specific product doesn't look that great, and will change the font face, or the letter spacing, or the line height, change the colors a bit, add drop shadows, and
call it a redesign.
I call it a redesign. In a sense, it is a redesign. Yeah. It's just a different type of format of skill building that some people it's very valuable to them. For people who don't know how to use Sketch, it's great. It's just that for a lot of product design companies, they want the former, a full thought out case study.
So you mentioned that there's solutions. I'm assuming there's a problem that the students worked on or work on throughout the 10 weeks. What are some examples of those problems? Is it like building an app from scratch? Is it working on something that's existing?
Yeah, so even since the conception of the class, we did focus on, there's a model that we use, Clay Christensen's jobs to be done format, where we say when there's a specific type of user who has a need, who wants to do something, but they can't do that well, and they list out the reasons why. That format we use to drive what a people problem is, and that's what we have the students start at. In terms of executing that solution, or even just identifying that problem, the first iteration, we had people just pick any problem in this space, where people were like, yeah, I can wake up in the morning. Oh, I can't you can't organize chores between my groups of friends, and then as a result they'll design an iOS app for it. And the issue with that was you might not even need an iOS app for that specific solution.
Yeah,
and some of the things were just so marginally trivial at that point to really govern a whole app
to solve the issue.
To solve the issue. So as a result, we kind of scoped that down to, okay, so we want people to at least design with context, where it's okay, so if people are on their phone, would they actually use this app to actually solve this problem? And we figured the best place for them to learn those types of skills was like just using existing products that like that currently do solve problems for the user.
Yeah, that's why they have millions of users.
Yeah. So like we just wanted people to get that context. So like people were eventually solving problems within a specific product, and that was a constraint.
So what's an example of a problem within one of these mainstream apps that you're talking about?
Yeah, like one of the products, and I think this was from one of our best case studies, was like people want to know more about a specific venue or restaurant, even in Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. Where like people are just screenshotting pictures of food and sending them to their friends saying like we should go here, and it'll take them a bit to kind of figure out where it is and like how to like access their website. So it's kind of like a fleshed out solution where it was like, okay, so here's this food, can I now book a table? It's kind of on the business side. And that was kind of like a really, really nice, elegant solution for like getting people that extra step of acting on, the intentions that they were originally having anyway.
So for you, let's just building off that people problem, the research side, I'm assuming the students would research Instagram users or people who are obsessed with food and all this stuff on Instagram.
Yeah.
From a visual design perspective, you have to be consistent with Instagram. You can't like use your own type and your own colors.
Yeah.
And from a product perspective, staying within the Instagram application or ecosystem to reserve your table from a product perspective is generally better because then more users will stay on the platform.
Right. Uh-huh.
So you're essentially attacking all of these areas through this class and through this case study.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, where it's like you can't just design without context. And like when people are realizing like, okay, so even if I'm putting this in Instagram, it's still Instagram first, right?
Yeah.
You can't like just make this entire product
Or
only
your own
like,
entry points or your own exit stuff. Or
yeah, and like making it just for like maybe. I think there are some explorations where you can like reserve the chair within the feed, and it's like, well, that kind of like might push away from like what Instagram essentially does, and understanding that and having people think through that and say, okay, you're right, or yeah, like this definitely isn't Instagram still, really help people understand product thinking. So
cool. And many students, they don't go to design school. They want to get into this field just like you did as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this organization really helped you do that. What would you recommend to students who may not have that same resource at their school or not that kind of support from their school? What can they do to start initiating programs like this?
Right, yeah, like, so I think the first thing is like initiate a program where you can have people who want to build a product together. And if you have developers, that's great. Even like theoretical, conceptual ideas is also such a good practice to have. And if we need to do it with like other designers or other aspiring designers, I think it's like even better. But if you don't have that kind of like network of people to kind of share that passion with, I think like you can find design like not just within like digital products. Like you can even consider like planning marketing campaigns, like a design project where you're actually interviewing your audience and understanding what their needs are. And
so
like,
you could blow up, like let's say a club reaches out to you to make like a quarter card or some promotional Facebook cover photo or something, right? You could blow that up into a little case study to try to achieve the most results. And you have metrics and you have research and you can essentially make this thing that you initially thought was just like a cool thing you made on Microsoft Word.
Yeah, and I think like the basis of like, graphic design is information architecture, and that's really important still in digital products. And like just finding those types of experiences is super crucial. Like even like reorganizing how you conduct recruitment for your club. Like there is a system that's in place that has users and they have an expected outcome. And like if they're not getting there, then how do you fix that? And like having that and being able to articulate that, write that up, will really help you practice, and like also might interest some recruiters if like you're conveying a specific product design thinking within that lens.
So before your first day at BuzzFeed, I'm sure you had to there was some interview process or something.
Right.
So I think a lot of students, there's always that question about that first internship and recruiting for the first time and interviewing for the first time. So could you walk us through both your interviews at BuzzFeed and Facebook? And I know they went well because you clearly worked there, but like, what were some things that you did that you think helped you stand out?
Yeah, so like, we can separate that into like my first BuzzFeed interview was not like super prepped for. Like I didn't know what product design was. I think they also asked me what the difference between product design and product management was. And I don't think I had a very good
one draws and one writes.
Yeah, I don't think I had a very good answer for that. But you know, I only had visual work, and I think what stood out for me in that specific process, especially as someone who didn't really know what he was getting into, was I was like conveying my solutions in a way that was a little bit thought out, where I wasn't just thinking about the color usage and like what looks good and what doesn't look good. I would say like, okay, we should add, you know, a meter here because it will give users a sense of who's going to a specific event. It was like an event app. And like having these like design decisions that stem specifically from behavioral psychology, just super, like it helped a lot because, you know, most interviewers want intentionality. And I was like kind of wired to do that from the get-go just because I had like the skill sets that help like connect to that specific type of dialogue that I was having with them. For my Facebook interview, I think it's like more different. I was a bit more prepared. I knew what product design was. I did have the case study work, and you know, I think like the theme still stays. It was really about like how well you can communicate design decisions and being able to say like, oh, I did X, Y, Z because it affected this specific metric or affected this specific user, and this is like why I think so, and here's like the evidence to support that. And even like when they would like, you know, like have a response to that or have like feedback to whatever I did, saying like, oh, I think you could have done this. It's like not just about defending your baby, right? It's really about taking that feedback and understanding, oh, like you like it does make a lot of sense, and I can either like say that you're right or that I think my solution is stronger, and like, just like having that fluidity of choosing either or without feeling bad about it is like super powerful when you're getting into you know, like larger tech companies where like it's crucial for you to be social and crucial for you to like communicate well. So I think that's what really can help me stand out in those interviews.
So many designers or many student designers are going through their first internship now.
Right.
And they may have never sat in a design critique, right? If they're not design school students and they're in this job, you know, once a week or maybe bi-weekly there are critiques.
Right.
Could you walk us through some of the most memorable critique experiences, memorable in the sense where you got railed essentially, and how did you handle that for the first time?
Okay, so like I think my most notable critique experience was at BuzzFeed, and I remember, you know, like spending like 2-3 weeks on a specific project, and like and then I went to critique, like showing, okay, here's like my early work and here's like the intention behind it. And like I remember the VP coming in at a time, and he would like look at the work and look at the original product that they were currently using, and I showed like my redesign next to it, and he'd be like, I think that like the product is doing exactly what it's intended to do. Like why is there resource on this specific design job? And it was like not because like it didn't make a lot of sense. He wasn't
trying to be degrading.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense, right? It was like this product affected maybe like 5-6 design or like creatives in like another part of the like, you know, the org, and I was doing a full redesign of this specific product. So it didn't make a lot of sense, but like it really got me to think like oh shit, like, you know, you do have to really think about the work that you're doing from like a lens where it's like, is this even meaningful work like at all? And like that in itself is like part of the design process, right? I'm thinking like, is it worth it for me to spend my resources on this thing? Because like, will it provide any like surmountable impact that, you know, can't be found anywhere else? So I think that was super life-changing for me because like, you know, I used to just follow the book.
Yeah. And again, many students in their first internship, or maybe they're recruiting right now and whatnot, they will have a manager during that time.
Right.
And many students may have issues where they might not have that kind of rapport that they expect to have with their manager. So what are some things that you can do in advance or throughout your internship to really build that relationship?
Yeah, and I think, you know, the one thing that my Facebook manager got me to do, Jeff, he like had our first one-on-one with me, and he asked me 3 things I really wanted to grow within this 3 months. And I think it was super helpful because I never really thought about it in those like three pillars or like just like facets of being a product designer. And I was like, okay, I think I'm bad in these 3 things. Can you help me improve them? And every week he would like check whether or not I'm improving in those areas. And at the end, he would say like, okay, so you set out to do this. This was your expected outcome, and here's where you lie on the spectrum of like actually achieving that goal. And I think that was super helpful because I don't think I would have worked as hard trying to fill in those gaps that I was having between me and someone else who's a full-time designer.
And I think that really helps because then your manager knows what you want out of that experience rather than her or him trying to dig that out of you and then not getting it right, and then you both get frustrated.
Yeah, and there's like a podcast that I listen to where it's like you need to help your manager become a good manager, right? And I think like that really speaks to it, right? Where like manager's job is to make you do the best work that you can, and like if you're not conveying that to them, then they can't really help you. You know, they're not mind readers, so.
So you also went through a full-time recruiting season, or full-time design position recruiting season.
Right.
If that, I don't know what the term is, but something around there. Can you take us through that experience, and what are the differences between going for a just straight-up full-time role compared to internships or an intern role, and what were some takeaways from that experience?
Yeah, I think the tough part was realizing that there's still more to learn. And I think a lot of that falls into the cultures of specific companies. And I got rejected from a bunch of companies, and I think all of them, like most of them rejected me. And like some of them were like for a different process fit. Like maybe I would do things differently because I was taught to do them differently. So I think that's interesting. Where like that's something to consider for anyone going into recruitment. Is like, you're never going to get a clear statement on why you didn't get the job, and a lot of recruiters have policies against that. But you need to be flexible in understanding that cultures differ between orgs, and you need to do like research or really figure out how you're going to fit within that specific culture, right? If it's for you to understand the mission more, or you to like interview previous product designers, or even to like read their blog posts, listen to their content, like figure out what makes their product design team different, and actually cater yourself to that. Because you want to like work well with the team,
there,
right?
Then clearly that's what they're expecting you, that you're going to spend 50 hours or 40 hours a week with us. So there has to be some sort of fit. And
there's some companies that are a bit more open about it, right? Like Facebook has their own like guide to the product design interview, and I'm sure other companies have their own like guide to the whiteboard challenge, and like actually understanding those on a basic level like really helps.
So we went ahead and polled all the student design communities that exist on Facebook, Medium, Twitter, and these are some of the questions and concerns that are on their mind. So our first question is, having the experience that you do, there must be some things that you feel like the industry doesn't quite understand about or doesn't quite get about the student design community. Can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, definitely. It might be a bit of a rant.
A little big.
Yeah, but I think like one issue to like really address is that if there's a gap between like what the industry thinks design is and what the students think design is, and there's an issue that isn't really being addressed properly, right?
So what do you think students think design is, and what do you think industry thinks design is?
Yeah, I think like, it goes down to design education, right? When you have designers right now who are uploading very visual-centric pieces onto Dribble and calling them case studies or redesigns or proper like design executables, right, or deliverables, and like real designers are saying like, oh well, it's not really about that, it's about the process, and there's like no way to really like shrink that gap. And I think that's like where like the issue comes about, right? Because like that happens a lot, right? For a lot of new designers, you think it's more about visual work. So I think like if you think about like why that happens, it really digs down into the culture of what designers like what cultures that designers tend to embody, or what the industry is like right now. And right now, I feel like the core problem is that getting into a full-time role or getting into the industry seems to be like a rite of passage where you have to like struggle to get there, if you know what I mean.
You have to know like the secrets that no one else.
Yeah, it's like like all of the new designers feel like, or the full-time designers felt like they had to struggle and learn a lot and like make a lot of mistakes to get there, and they think like that's like the path that everyone should take. And there are like so many other career choices that don't follow that mental model, right? Where like everything is laid out for them, the academia is there. You could get your first internship without really having that much experience, and you use that to get that experience. But when you go into design, right, the first internship, they're requiring so much of you. and there's no way for like students to really understand where to get that experience. So I think like the industry does a good job in like being very open and like sharing like articles and podcasts about design, and I think that's great. But I think we're not really being direct about how we educate the new generation of designers so they can actually understand what this is all about. So that's where I really stand on
So
that.
do you think students just assume what's happening in the industry? Because like there are these, you mentioned those podcasts and those articles that they do share about what's happening. Yet for some reason students, which is ironic because their students just don't understand what's being fed to them, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like I think it really has to do with like how we learn anyway, right? Like mimicry. So you know, like someone who doesn't really have a mentor who's in the industry or someone who's a part of that culture, they're going to see all of the stuff that they post on Dribbble, Behance, and what they're going to see is like very polished, visual-centric work, right?
Yeah.
But they're not really going to understand the process or the year-long process it took to get them from conception to completion. But what they're just mimicking is what they see, and they're not really getting the mentorship that guides them like, oh, okay, like that's not actually the full picture. Here's a breakdown of what really happened. And like, you know, I guess the solution or semi-solution is writing more case studies and more elaborate case studies, but even that is an abstraction
Of what actually happened.
of what actually happens under the hood, right? You know, you can't really condense what happens in 6 months in just a 9-minute read. And I think like how do we get like that full experience out to students so they understand what they actually need to do?
The second question is, so you have so much to manage between school and life and just trying to be a full-time designer while taking full-time load of classes. How do you stay on top of everything?
So like I don't think I do. I think like I could have made a lot more sacrifices. I did have to balance
A lot more sacrifices.
Yeah, like I had to balance a lot, and I felt like I was sacrificing like sleep, like my social life.
Do you think that was healthy, or would you do that again?
You know, it could go both ways. Sometimes I like to think it's a, you know, like a character building or something like that.
Yeah.
But in other scenarios, I felt like I could have spent a lot more time on myself and like things that made me happy.
So there's a lot of articles, blogs, newsletters, and just noise in the industry. And as a student designer, you feel like you have to read everything and listen to everything, or every day you should be on top of it all. So how do you filter out things that are good and content that's helpful versus things that are just noise?
So I think like to spin like that question, I think what the industry does really well is like it kind of democratizes the voice, where like now everyone from a junior to a senior designer can have a very valid opinion on a certain thing just because like the field is so new. So like I don't think there is really noise, because I think any noise is good enough noise. So I think it's more about trying to get in all that noise and really deciding what's beneficial for someone's growth, right? If someone like has an article about a specific process that they're working on and you try to like imitate that and see if it works for yourself, it's ultimately up to you to decide to keep that, right? And so I think
you should take in everything and then pick and choose what you want to keep.
yeah, I think like that's like the best way to go about improving yourself, right? Like there are small nuances that people are discovering and keeping to themselves, but there are some nuances that people are actually sharing to everyone. And it's like it's up to you to kind of like figure out if you want to try that out. And I think that's a great thing that the industry does, right? Because we're really like filling these small little, you know, work gaps or work niches or work styles that people are discovering for themselves.
Do you have any mentors that you follow or sought out to stay inspired, or things that act like pseudo-mentors, like resources or sites or places to keep you inspired and hungry to want to keep growing?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of my mentors came from the industry when I was like doing my internships. I think like those types of feedback when I was like there was really beneficial for like me starting out, and they'll always stay with me. I think like nowadays, like since I'm like outside of work and like more like in school and now I'm on break, I think the peer relationships, the people you have around you who are kind of in the same situation, if you cultivate like a culture of just sharing content with each other and also getting feedback from each other, helping us with interviews, and I think that's where the mentorship really comes. Like you can read articles all you want, and you know, use like internet resources, but like finding like a support group it's just like immensely helpful, and like I think that's like a great way to grow. So
as a design leader on campus at Cornell, I'm sure people come up to you asking all the time, how do I get into design? So what are some pieces of immediate actionable advice that you would give to someone in a similar position who's listening or viewing right now?
Yeah, so I get the question a lot, and it's kind of hard because like our school doesn't really support um, like the design education that is expected of us at this moment in time. Uh, and I think I would always give a laundry list of things, like here are the things that you should read, here are the things that you should do, and kind of doesn't resonate as much. It's because like they might have different priorities, as well as like it could be just like an overload of information. The one thing I think that is really helpful is like self-awareness. I think once people understand, if once they understand if their work is not where it needs to be, so like understanding like, hey, my skill level's here, a full-time designer is about here, I want to get my first internship in about 6 months, so how do I get from here to here so I can get my first internship and get that experience, right? So I think that's the gap that people should focus on is like, okay, so I need to grow. First, let me assess what needs to be grown, right? Like, what am I good at, what am I not good at, and how can I get there? And then figuring out like a plan, a contingency plan to actually get you from A to B.
So we've talked a lot about what you've done and how you've gotten there. So what's next for you?
Yeah, so I'll be at Facebook joining the Newsy team for the next however so many years of my life.
10 years.
Yeah, who knows? But I think like what really strikes me as important is I think I got to where I am today because of independent education or whatnot, or like different unorthodox approaches to like education. And I think like I want to be in that space where there is an issue with like information translation in any field, right? Like some people aren't getting like the right support to actually study for specific things, to get specific degrees or certifications, and how can we make that better? And I think that's what I really want to get into after my 10 or 20 years. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you so much.
Students Who Design is written and produced by Sahil Koja and Omar Abdul Rahim. Visit our website, studentswho.design, for more information.